Good morning, and welcome to the latest Curse of Politics Ontario Election Edition. Well, folks, there is joy in Leafville today after the big comeback last night. It's too bad the fan base had dismantled the team and sold it for parts after the first period. Not a lot of confidence out there. Nonetheless, there was big news on the campaign trail yesterday, and here to tell us about it is Allison Smith from Queen's Park Today. Hi, Allison. Good morning.
Hi, good morning. Yeah, we got the first debate yesterday, and unlike a lot of what we've seen so far in the campaign, we actually talked about the COVID pandemic. So that was kind of a little bit of a new entry into the sphere of topics of conversation. Although I don't know if any of you would have seen this, but the PCs started running an ad last week that attacked Horwath on pandemic stuff, on the fact that she wanted to keep stuff closed. It was a video ad. So they kind of brought it into the campaign first, although I have no idea where that ad's actually running, because you never know with those digital things. So who's actually seeing it? Nonetheless, let's jump into what's happening today.
Well, wait. Before you go on from there. So COVID's interesting. What was the line of attack from the opposition on COVID?
They kind of attacked him from all sides on the file, and I think that was kind of where Ford got a little bit stumbly, at least in the debate, because he started talking about the Ontario spirit and negotiating with Donald Trump over N95 masks, and that's not exactly what I think people wanted to hear. So that was kind of, I think, the weak point for him on the debate.
I agree. I was watching the debate, and I thought it was the only time where Ford seemed to be off his balance. Just the subject matter seemed to make him defensive, and then he kind of started to stumble around. And when he brought up Donald Trump, nobody fought Donald Trump harder than me. It was like a non sequitur of hilarious proportions. Like, it was like, what? Hang on. What? Are we talking about the Pennsylvania primary? What the fuck is going
on? All right. So what is happening today, Allison? Well, how do they leapfrog out of the debate? What are they all doing?
Well, Doug Ford, again, no schedule today. We'll have to be watching his Twitter to maybe see what region of the province he's in. I doubt he's still up north. He's probably moved on to somewhere else. Liberal leader Stephen Del Duca is going to talk healthcare in Etobicoke Lakeshore. That's the riding where the Liberals are running Lee Faircloth. She's like a former president of a hospital who just resigned to run for them. So I think they might be trying to up their healthcare bona fides at this point, because they have a lot of healthcare candidates that they haven't really been talking about so much. So I maybe expect to see some of that. Later, he's going to be going to McDonald's in Vaughan, the riding he's hoping to win for McHappy Day, and then heading to Ajax. Horwath is going to be talking about affordability, putting money back in drivers' pockets, and then she's going to be heading to southwestern Ontario, Thamesford specifically, to a farm. And I expect that she's going to stick around the southwest for the next day or two.
Excellent. Thanks, Allison. These updates are so helpful, as is your newsletter in the morning. 6 o'clock, Queen's Park Today. Where do we get it?
PoliticsToday.news.
Excellent. Thanks, Allison. We'll see you tomorrow.
Thanks, Allison.
So the debates yesterday, obviously the big news. And did it change anything, Jenny?
No, not a thing. I thought it was a boring debate, which I think is great for an incumbent. It's great for Doug. I don't think it changed the needle anything anyway. And then the fact that the main issue that we talked about today that was discussed was COVID goes back to my point that people are done. They don't want to hear about COVID. They're as soon as they hear this, they are. I believe they are tuning out. And so the more the opposition stays talking about COVID and what decisions the government made 2 months ago or 2 years ago is a very good day for incumbents, because what we have seen at all levels of government is that people are willing to forgive decisions on COVID, regardless of which area of the spectrum that you come from, by incumbent governments. They're willing to forgive as long as as long as now there's just, let's not talk about it. We've decided to go on with life. We all know it's around. 90% of Canadians are vaccinated, and have it is people have have for the most part moved on and do not want to talk about the average person does not want to talk about COVID policies. There's obvious exceptions there is obvious exceptions to that in terms of mandates, but for the most part, in terms of the Ontario election, that is not what people want to hear.
Well, a couple of things about the debate, but I can't help it. I gotta hop on the COVID thing. I'm sorry, Jenny, but I mean, like that. I just want to deposit. I believe that's your Facebook group talking, not necessarily the general population. But the most important thing about COVID, because I don't disagree with you, that people are very forgiving on it, and so your ability to use it like a sword is limited. But what I thought was interesting was, as we said with Allison, COVID was the only time that Ford got knocked off stride. So it was, at least it had some utility in that sense, in that it appeared to fluster him. I had 3 takes on the debate. I actually thought it was a good debate. I thought it was feisty. It was way sharper. It was not the sort of polite town hall that we all predicted. It was not that. It was a pretty sharp debate. It's the first time I saw the opposition leaders bring up cost of living quickly and sharply.
Can I just interject with you, Scott, there for a second?
Yeah.
By the way, that's not an easy thing to do. I know that we told the leaders that they had to do that, Horwath and Del Duca, that they had to do that, but it's not a good room for that, right?
No,
it's not a
really
room. It's not a room full of partisans. It's a room full of, municipal politicians and reporters and stakeholders of various kinds, and so they're not expecting you to get into a bare-knuckled partisan brawl, and they may not respond to it well. So it's just not. I'm just posting that they did it, but it's not an easy room to turn and fight in.
They were helped by 2 factors in getting into it. One, they were helped by by the moderator, who brought up a cost of living question. If it wasn't the first question, it was the second question. So it came up fast. And second of all, they were helped by the fact that actually cost of living actually is the number one issue in the province, right? So it's on people's minds, and it's particularly on people's minds in the north. Jenny's mentioned a couple times. If you think gas prices are high in Toronto, try going, to Sudbury or Thunder Bay. But a couple other things. So it was feisty. I actually came away weirdly impressed by all 3 leaders. Ford was really disciplined. He got a little flustered, as we said, on the pandemic stuff, but he was really doing that thing where he's like, I know you're going to be coming at me. I'm not going to get knocked off script. I'm not going to get caught up in details. Hearty heart, I'm going to be the root beer, A&W root beer bear. Like, I'm not going to be bothered by stuff. He was very disciplined, and I thought it was pretty effective. He got all his lines out clean. And frankly, the best exchange of the entire, if you mark these things on the basis of punches, he had the best exchange by far. He grabbed Del Duca by the throat on the highways issues. And I see people making fun of Ford's grammar, online. It doesn't
be me. That would be me.
Yeah. Whatever. Okay. It doesn't matter.
I was just doing that for my mom. I was just doing that for my mom.
And Del Duca looked good, to be honest with you, except, he lost the moment. There was only one moment, I think, probably in the debate that was worth broadcasting, and he lost it. But his facility overall, his command of the issues, ability to talk, he sounded good. But, the third and most important thing that I would say is
his ability to talk.
His ability to talk. He just sort of talks. It's very good. He has vocal cords. They come right up out through his mouth. It projects. People can hear. I think this is an underrated value in politics. But, the most important take is that nobody knocked Ford off stride. And I just don't. I just come back to it over and over and over again. It's all we talked about for a week. If they don't disrupt Ford, this thing is going to have a predictable outcome.
Out there in corporate Canada, there are meaningful behaviors that make our country and world a better place. And then there are just words, the signaling of virtue without the actions necessary to make any real change. For a few weeks now, we've been telling the story of TELUS's ESG commitments, environmental, social, and governance. TELUS is a company driven by social purpose. Not because it's fashionable in this third decade of the 2000s, but right from their inception. To use their world-leading technology in a way that's not only good for business, but good for people and the world. Across healthcare and agriculture, sustainability, bridging the digital divide to ensure that all Canadians have connectivity. They put the well-being of their customers, communities, and the planet first. It all sounds so nice, right? But let me tell you how TELUS governs themselves so that those nice-sounding words become actions. Theirs is a culture of what gets measured gets done. ESG targets are built right into how they evaluate their corporate performance. Environmental initiatives, measured and reported on. Carbon reduction, measured and reported on. Community giving, measured and reported on. The list goes on and on, Hurley-Burleyites. That's how seriously TELUS takes ESG reporting. And the result is it drives accountability. It turns their values into behaviors. And it's not just private reporting either. TELUS, as you know, is a public company. Transparent disclosure of financial performance is a given. What separates TELUS is that they also believe in full disclosure of their performance across all ESG metrics and how they make their decisions about where to put their efforts and their money around environmental and social sustainability. Transparency means you can read all about it here in their sustainability and ESG report at telus.com/sustainability. Jenni, why is it so hard to land a punch on Ford? What is it about Ford that makes him difficult? I mean, because, there's a lot about him you'd think he'd be an easy mark in a debate, but he actually isn't. Why is that?
Well, I think it goes back to what I was saying. I think the opposition go after him on issues that, there's stuff that every incumbent, including Doug, you could go after and land punches, but the opposition chooses to stick to issues that actually he's Teflon on. And he does have the aw shucks demeanor going for him. People like him. He falls into the category of people that would love to have a beer with him and like sit and chat with him. He is what you see is what you get with him. And so I think that the opposition continue to not only understand the issue set, to Scott's point, in terms of cost of living, they're still not in terms of talking about that, because that actually would put the government on the defensive. But he's more likable. He is a more likable character than any other person on that stage last night or yesterday afternoon. So an afternoon debate. And so I just think that I don't think until the opposition parties, until the Liberals and the NDP and the Greens, there was 4 people on stage, Scott, not 3. Poor Mike Schreiner.
That's true. Sorry, you're right.
Until they stop underestimating Doug and underestimating the appeal he has with voters, they are never going to be able to land a punch, because you cannot. If you go into a campaign, and we've talked about this before, with your bias and your preconceived notions about your opponents, you will lose. You have to actually put yourself in the mind of average people and what the appeal of your opposition is. It's campaigns make this mistakes on both sides. Conservatives have made this mistake with Trudeau, for example. Yeah. And so I think that until you actually logically look at who you're running against, you're not going to be able to land a blow on them.
I super agree with that, David. I so strongly agree with Jenni there. It isn't enough to say, okay, well, we want to talk about the issues that government ought to be held to account on. It's what issues are people going to actually hold this particular government and this particular leader to account on? Because Ford does, as we've talked before, he benefits from this dumbass dividend. There was a perfect example of it in the middle of the debate yesterday around firefighters and firefighter accreditation, and how some communities in the north have to rely solely on volunteer firemen, and are they doing enough? And Doug Ford was, he was just like, hey, folks, nobody supports our firefighters more than me, right? And you can see the opposition leaders, they're rolling their eyes. That's not what your policies are. You've been premier for 4 years. Don't tell us that. You haven't done anything for them, and blah, blah, blah. And they misunderstand that's going to roll off of him like water off a duck's ass. It just is, because you've got to find those issues that A, fluster the guy, and B, people say, oh, okay, I am actually willing to reevaluate Ford on the basis of what you said there. And cost of living, they're bringing it up every once in a while now, but they don't ascribe it to him. They don't say, you're to blame for some of this, and you're to blame for not doing more about it, and here's why, and here's how. So, it doesn't work when they just roll their eyes at Ford's responses, because his response is actually connecting and their attack is not.
In terms of thinking about Monday, the next debate, Jenni, it's an interesting conundrum, because I am inclined to agree with you that the election is not going to be decided on the basis of COVID handling, but on other issues. But if COVID, that seemed to be the issue that Ford reacted defensively on. That seemed to be the issue that got to Ford personally, that he felt unfairly attacked, and it discombobulated him a little bit. So maybe there's a way to use that issue to get him off of his game. And he doesn't end up losing because of COVID. He ends up losing because his reaction to being challenged on the issue revealed something about him that was unpleasant.
Well, you could. There are issues you could go after them in terms of COVID, but the opposition aren't going to do that. Like vaccine mandates are one of them. So you have people, it's not just the truckers who protested in January, February in Ottawa, but it's healthcare workers, PSWs, nurses. I was back in Lindsay on the weekend, and Ross Memorial Hospital lost 20 nurses due to vaccine mandates, who were fired, and now they're scrambling. They don't have enough nurses to be able to staff the hospital. And so there are issues if the opposition want to actually go after the government in terms of COVID policies and the fact and in terms of vaccine mandates. But the opposition are all either where the government is or actually want more draconian measures in terms of continued COVID mandates and policies. So they can't do it, David. So there's what they're going. Kids have to be fully vaccinated. We're taking away parents' right to choose in terms of whether their kids get a COVID vaccine. Let's keep masks going. You see the COVID theater of Del Duca every day. Some days he has masks, some days he doesn't. He gets yelled at by both sides whether he wears a mask or doesn't, and then changes. So they could actually, there's substantive policies that could go on, but they're not going to be willing to do what would actually land a punch on the government.
Yeah, I don't agree with that as a bunch of things. I don't agree, obviously, with the sort of latent suggestion that people are unconcerned about their health going forward, and I don't agree with the assertion that it was truckers that were protesting. It was a salad bowl of interests. Truckers were vaccinated and not protesting; they were following the law. But set all that stuff aside, I don't agree with the strategy of going after those specific things, because I agree with you that it isn't about COVID. The whole thing, and I've been harping on this for 10 days. I think you use COVID as a proof point that you can't count on Doug. So you blow by COVID. You just deposit COVID to try to destabilize and anger him, right? You screwed up on COVID in a whole bunch of times. You closed our public parks for no goddamn good reason. There was no scientific basis for that. You're hopscotching all over. You didn't protect our students. You didn't protect our schools. And now we can't count on you to deal with this. So you have to translate it, get him destabilized by bringing that up, make him defensive, say that he was only looking out for his friends, handing out kits to people that were lined up around the donation circle for the PCs, get him freaked out about that, destabilized, flustered like he was yesterday, then move on to an issue and say, and that's why we can't count on you to deal with the issue of cost of living, so on and so forth, and start smacking around. But you're not going to get anywhere if he's able to maintain that, generally what he maintained yesterday, which is that, hey, folks, I'm just working hard here, and if there's something wrong, well, by God, we got to get somebody in government who's going to do something about it, and that's me. He had that shtick going all day long yesterday, and you couldn't land a punch on him. You got to start by getting him flustered, and if the pandemic's the quickest way to do it, then use it.
But I can't believe. I think it's going to. If I'm just going to listen, I think people are we're bored. Everyone is tired of talking about COVID. I think that's what we got out of the debate. I don't think Doug was that flustered coming out of it. But in terms of going back and saying he handled COVID wrong, I was the most critical of the government on this panel during COVID. We can go back to the pods that we had, Scott. You and David were actually fine with the government's policies during in the handling of COVID. So to go back now and say it was
none of us praised his handling on the parks. That weekend was a debacle. That's the moment of incompetence that everybody agreed on in the whole province. And you go back to that.
Ontario is facing an historic housing affordability crisis, probably the worst in our province's history. Right now, if you get in your car and drive down a 400 series highway, you'll find 10 local markets where the average price of a home exceeds $1 million. Even in small towns like Kawartha Lakes and Fenelon Falls, the birthplace of the Curse's own Jenni Byrne, an average priced home is over $800,000. So when 46% of Ontario home buyers say that they are looking to move outside the province to find a new home, you can see why. Our original sponsor, the Ontario Real Estate Association, Says years of bad policy, a lack of supply, increased demand, and rising costs are to blame. If we don't do something about it now, home ownership may be out of reach for an entire generation of Canadians. That's why this June election, realtors are calling on all parties to reduce costs for first-time buyers, get more supply into the market, and end exclusionary zoning rules that keep middle-class families out of growing neighborhoods. You'll be hearing a lot more from Maria over the next several weeks about Ontario's housing affordability crisis and what can be done to fix it. Because Maria wants to see more young people become homeowners, and that starts with building a home for everyone. Read Oria's plan at ahomeforeveryone.info. What interests me, I have this personal interest in long-term care issues, but why isn't that the perfect issue for the NDP? Because that is an issue where the Liberals and the Conservatives jointly presided over a debacle, right? Where the Liberals had 15 years and they left the long-term care homes in the state that they were in. Ford made it worse when he came in, promised an iron ring fence, whatever the fuck it was. Nothing happened. Tons of people died. I can't imagine that, A, that isn't still an emotive issue in this province. And second of all, that doesn't fit the, you can't trust either of these old line parties on this stuff better than any other issue for the NDP. Well, that's where I would go if I was them.
I know there's crickets coming from me and Jenny. I agree, but isn't that tell you something about the way both parties? Today Allison tells us that Del Duca's going to be on, he's going to be on healthcare. Yesterday he was on immigration in and around the debate. I think both opposition parties are rolling out daily announcements on daily issues, and it shifts. And I don't think there's a thematic message, particularly a thematic attack that's emerging. Why wouldn't you just why wouldn't you focus on the same issue 3 days in a row? Make it an attack and hammer away and see if you can penetrate the shielding.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with Scott on this one. I would, and to go back what Scott said earlier and what we have talked about on the pod since the campaign started is I cannot, for the life of me, understand why they're not going on cost of living, as we say every single day. I do not understand it. It would put the government on defense. And the only argument that one of the pushbacks that of course the government would have was they would actually have to then go after Trudeau. It actually then would, they've had this, Doug and Justin have this bromance going. But at the end of the day, if you're getting pounded by the opposition in terms of the high price of groceries and gas and everything else, you're eventually going to have to go to inflation, which of course is a federal government problem in terms of the printing of money and what have you. But if I don't understand why they don't, because from a political point of view, not only does it help them, not only is it top of mind to people, but it also is eventually, if you pound hard enough, you're going to have the Doug and the PCs are going to have no choice but to eventually be like, okay, Justin, we're sorry, but you want to know something, guys? It's his fucking fault, not mine.
Right. Do you think they should focus hard on gas? Because that's where that's where the province has an actual lever. Like if you complain about the high cost of food, it's not obvious to people what the provincial government ought to do about that. But the price of gasoline, they've got a tax. They could feel pressure to do something about the price of gasoline if you isolate it on that issue.
Yeah, but I don't think that there doesn't seem to be any desire to actually to do that. You've got three opposition parties that are crawling over each other to be the most progressive, seemingly progressive, woke party to the left. And it just seems almost to them unconscionable that they would go after the government in terms of gas prices. Because my goodness, that would mean we would support the oil sands, and that would mean X, Y, and Z. And I think it's an absolute abject mistake by them. It's great for the PC party. It's great for my friends working in that campaign. But it's going to continue to be a very boring campaign for all, and very good for the PC party if Del Duca and Horwath and Schreiner just basically try to out woke each other and have basically seemingly announcements announcements that no one gives a shit about except for some people writing newsletters environmental or left-wing organizations praising them how good it is. But so they can continue down this road, but it's going to continue to be a very good campaign for Doug.
Jenni's characterization of our part of the spectrum is demoralizing. Set aside the word woke for a second because it's such a fun label. But I agree with Jenni. I'm going to surprise you in particular. I mean, I'll speak solely. I mean, I don't know too much about Ontario Greens, and I know less about the Ontario NDP than I like to think. But I know the Ontario Liberal Party, and it's a unique cultural beast.
My read of social media, Scott, is that the New Democrats in Ontario are perfectly comfortable with you speaking on their behalf.
Absolutely.
They feel fully represented on this podcast through you.
Speaking of newsletters, I get a lot of that in newsletters that are written almost solely for my benefit. People, New Democrats and progressives writing to me saying, "You are a champion. Thank you." But you know, I wanted to on the gas issue and to Jenni's point, the Ontario Liberal Party is a unique cultural beast in political terms, right? And that Ontario Liberals are federal Liberals, right? And they identify federally, and so I do think. You know, and you sort of go, well, why don't people go this way? There are these weird sort of cultural constraints people put on themselves and parties sometimes put on themselves. I think it's hard for Liberals in Ontario who, depending upon what the electoral cycle is, are working hard and passionately on federal policy issues and federal politics to switch over now and go, okay, well, let's just run as mercenary as we can on gas prices and say, why isn't the government doing more? Cut gas taxes, go at them with an axe on that, because they're like thinking, well, but I'm talking about climate policy. I'm talking about carbon taxes. I'm talking about this set of issues, in 18 months from now, I'll be advocating those things. And so they have trouble getting there and squaring it. And so they, and maybe for reasonable reasons, but that avenue of attack is probably removed by themselves from their own menu.
Yeah. Hey, I got some interesting issue data from that Greg Lyle Innovative Survey. You interested to hear it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, Bucker Ride. Do you support or oppose the plan to reduce transit fares to $1? Strongly support 19%. Somewhat support 21% for a total of 40%. Don't give a shit 25%. Somewhat oppose 13%. Strongly oppose 16% for a total of 29%. So 40 support, 30 oppose, 25 don't give a shit. Had you heard about it? Were you following it very closely? 8% of the population. Are you somewhat closely following that issue? 27% of the population. Not very closely, 34%. Not at all, 27%. So essentially 60% of the population never heard of that thing at all, and probably more never heard of it at all. And less than 10% really had zoned in on the Liberal promise for a Bucker Ride. And it was sort of, it was a little bit of a mixed bag in terms of its impact anyway. So there you go. That's an issue we were all excited about for a few moments at a point in time.
Well, don't say we were.
Come on, I'm blaming you too, Jenni. Come on.
Hey, listen, you got to hold up some corner of the Curse of Politics podcast. You're in this boat with us, sister.
The additional funding that was announced for the additional funding that was announced by Trudeau and Ford to retool auto plants prior to the election. Followed it very closely, 5%. Followed it somewhat closely, 29%. Followed it not very closely, 34%. Followed it not at all, 28%.
When people say they somewhat closely followed something, they are 100% lying, right?
100%. These are people that do not want to show up for the exam.
Right. Oh, yeah, no, I heard. Yeah, I was on. I can't talk about it.
I heard something about that. Asked whether they support or oppose that measure of the retooling of the auto plants. 15% strongly support. 30% somewhat support. 27% don't give a shit. And 17% oppose. 12% don't know. Didn't exactly light up the board either. 15% strongly support. Now, just for interest's sake, Greg asked this question. Would you support or oppose the provincial government taking steps to regulate access to abortion? Oh, Scott's head perks up there.
Oh, man.
Strongly support 9%. Somewhat support 15% for a total of 24% support. 24% neither support nor oppose. 6% somewhat oppose. 36% strongly oppose for a total of 42% oppose. 10% don't know. So 2-1 with about a third of the population ambivalent. He asked how much trust you have in each party to regulate access to abortion. The percentage who don't trust the NDP, 22. The percentage who don't trust the Liberals, 25. The percentage who don't trust the PCs, 37.
Something to work with there. You'll go through a wall of elite and media condemnation when you bring this up. And you and I have been through this movie, David, right? When you bring this issue up, doesn't matter about Roe v. Wade, doesn't matter about the U.S. Supreme Court. It will be characterized as a non sequitur desperate play, right? Bring it up out of the blue. It's got nothing to do. You'll have like people in the Globe Mail write columns saying, it's such a pathetic move. It's got nothing to do with jurisdiction, all that kind of stuff. But you can say, listen, these clinics are provincially regulated. Access to them can be made easier or harder by provincial design. We've seen this in places like PEI. And so, boom, let's go hard. It might have some traction. Right now, I mean, what's so dispiriting about that?
Is there anything that stops Ford from being full-throatedly pro-choice?
I don't think so. Is there, Jenny? He doesn't seem to be constrained on that. And I don't think people think of him.
I think it would be, listen, if we're at the provincial stage of the campaign where the Liberals are starting to say, let's bring out the abortion card, then Del Duca is absolutely fucked.
Why? I mean, that's what I was just talking about. That's just the kind of the knee-jerk, it's desperate. But if it works, I mean, what David just said is that none of these issues, it's like, okay, well, what do I have to do to get people to pay attention? I have to drive a car into their house with a flaming lawn sign and go, hey, it's the Liberal Party. I'm here to talk to you about this fucking election. So I don't know. Like,
it's an absolute non-issue. If you guys,
I just said 37% of people don't trust Ford on it.
Well, wait, but elections can turn over non-issues, Jenny, right? Gun control is a non-issue in this country. And yet the federal election turned on it. If it's not turning on anything else, obviously the people want the election to be about affordability. But if nobody makes it about affordability, it could end up being about something else.
Yeah, but Aaron O'Toole helped make it an issue about guns. If honest to God, there has not been an election talked about. You guys try to throw out the fucking abortion stuff all the time. It's not working. It worked. It worked in terms of destabilizing the Conservative Party in the last 3 decades. Once you guys were a one-trick pony on it. So if we're like going in a time machine back to 2004 and try to trip up the PC Party of Ontario on abortion, then it's a pretty sad fucking day for the opposition. And you guys need to burn.
I don't know, man. You seem rankled. Seems to me like it's already making some it's working already. Look at you.
No, it's actually go ahead. They should try to do it because it's going to completely
I don't know. You spilled your tea all over the goddamn table though since David started talking about it.
It means you guys should burn your entire fucking party to the ground and start over.
Okay, what?
Well, that's happened. We've tried that twice.
Yeah, look at us. We've still got a book of matches left. Look out, Liberal Party, any place.
All right, we're out of time. Blessing or curse? Scott, go first.
I'm going to have the same curse as yesterday. The fucking premier goes on that debate yesterday, then walks out and doesn't scrum. And I just, I'm sorry, but somebody's got to make an issue out of the opposition parties can't, but the media have got to start pounding away on this thing. And Jenny's going to make fun of me and other people will make fun of me and, the media make themselves the issue. But Jesus H. Christ, nobody's holding this guy to account. He doesn't release his itinerary. We don't know where the fuck he's going. And then he doesn't take questions. Someone's got to get in his grill and make it impossible for him not to do that.
All right, Jenny, first of all, bless you for being up at this hour because you're out at Edmonton for the Conservative debate. So thank you, God, for getting up to do this. And and not missing a beat. Anyway, do you got a blessing or a curse?
Well, actually, I don't really have much. I was actually going to say like that. I feel like, do you guys remember Good Morning Vietnam? The first time Adrian Cronauer, Robin Williams' character, comes on and it's like, 600 hours. What does the O stand for? Oh my God, it's early. That's exactly how I felt this morning. My blessing is my blessing as a Tory, as a conservative, is keep it boring, keep on irrelevant issues to the NDP, the Greens, and the Liberals, because every day you do it, every day that you want to make the media the story, every day that you want to hammer on issues that nobody cares about. The reason the media aren't really covering it is because nobody cares about it. There's got to be something new in news. Keep doing that, because as a conservative, that makes me happy.
My blessing is to the road to the Ring of Fire. You've been promised for so long. You were promised by McGuinty. You were promised by Wynne. You were promised by Ford. Now you're promised by everybody again. May you one day see life. May you one day actually be built. Here's to a road to the Ring of Fire. Not developing the Ring of Fire. I wouldn't want to ask something like that. I wouldn't want to, I don't want to get greedy. Just a road. That's all I want. Let's get it done.
Get her done.
Let's get her done.
Oh, you
exactly
can't help
right.
yourself. Sly endorsement.
I'm going to be voting for him by the end of the election. It's inevitable. All right, I'd like to thank our presenting sponsor, TELUS. I'd like to thank our original sponsor, the Ontario Real Estate Association. Can't even speak this morning. I'd like to thank Jenni and Scott, obviously, and all you accursed for listening. Thanks a lot. We'll see you tomorrow morning. Take care.
Bye.